Welcome to Zoe Stories, the surgery that turned me into a full woman. My name is Alex, and for as long as I can remember, I've always felt like a puzzle with a piece missing. Outwardly, I looked like the typical guy, short hair, casual t-shirts, jeans, but inside, a deeper truth simmered quietly, one that only I truly understood. The world around me had always expected one thing from me, and I complied, performing the role, smiling, nodding, living the life I was supposed to. But behind closed doors, I experimented, I explored, I tried on different identities, different versions of myself. Crossdressing was my secret sanctuary, a way to express the side of me that never saw daylight. I worked as a software developer, a job that demanded focus, logic, and an analytical mind. Numbers, codes, and algorithms dominated my days, yet my nights were filled with color, fabric, and the soft swish of skirts brushing against my legs. My apartment became a safe space where my inner identity could breathe. Here, no judgment existed, only mirrors reflecting the woman I always felt like inside. I would spend hours experimenting with makeup, perfecting eyeliner, and finding the right lipstick shades that made me feel alive. Heels were both a challenge and a thrill, each step reminding me that femininity could be both empowering and fragile. Then there was Isabella. She was my girlfriend, but also my confidant in ways no one else could be. From the start, she had sensed there was more to me than met the eye, though she didn't know the full extent of my secret life. Her curiosity was gentle, her questions probing, but never judgmental. Isabella's presence was both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because I could be myself around her, terrifying because the truth of my transformation could crumble the trust we had built. Our relationship thrived on intimacy, vulnerability, and a shared understanding of unspoken desires, but this secret side of me had never been revealed, not fully. The day the story began felt ordinary at first. I woke to the soft light spilling through the blinds, the city still hushed in the early morning. But beneath the calm, my mind was restless. A letter lay on the kitchen counter when I entered, its envelope sleek, professional, stamped with a clinic's logo. I didn't recognize the sender at first, but curiosity quickly overcame hesitation. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was an invitation, a consultation for gender-confirming surgery. Detailed brochures, explanations, and testimonials sprawled across the page, each one a mixture of hope and fear. I sank into my chair, heart pounding. Could I really do this? The possibility of stepping fully into my true self both exhilarated and terrified me. Crossdressing had been a temporary escape, but surgery offered permanence, a final, irreversible transformation. I felt the familiar mix of excitement and shame. My hands shook as I traced the pictures of women who had undergone similar procedures, imagining myself among them. What would it feel like to wake up and see my reflection fully aligned with my identity? Could I handle the consequences if anyone found out? Isabella entered the kitchen then, her voice soft but curious. "Alex, what's got you so quiet?" I fumbled with the brochures, trying to hide my sudden flush. But she noticed, always noticing. "Surgery," I finally admitted, words tumbling out in a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Her eyes widened, not in judgment, but in curiosity. She sat down beside me, reading over my shoulder, her hand brushing against mine. This could change everything," she whispered. And she was right. Everything, my life, our relationship, my very existence, hung on the precipice of transformation. That evening, we talked for hours. Isabella listened as I confessed my dreams, my fears, and the years of secret experimentation. She didn't flinch at my vulnerability. Instead, she encouraged me, her support grounding me while also amplifying the suspense. The journey ahead was daunting. Surgery meant recovery, exposure, and navigating a world that might not understand. But it also promised authenticity, a life where the reflection in the mirror would finally match the person I felt I had always been. As night fell, I found myself alone in my apartment, sitting before the mirror. I traced my fingers along my jawline, my eyes lingering on the outline of my chest, imagining the changes that could come. The thrill of possibilities surged through me, mingled with fear of losing control, of being judged, or even of something going wrong. I thought of Isabella again, her supportive smile and unwavering confidence in me. Could I take this leap, knowing how irreversible it would be? This was more than a decision. It was a challenge, a test of courage and identity. The choice to undergo surgery wasn't just about appearance. It was about embracing myself fully, confronting every doubt, every fear, and every societal expectation I had ever internalized. My heart raced as I realized there was no turning back once I began. Every step from here would take me closer to a permanent truth I had only dared to glimpse in secret, and the suspense of the unknown thrilled and terrified me in equal measure. And so, as I sat in the dim glow of my apartment, the letter clutched tightly in my hands, I knew the journey was about to begin. The transformation wouldn't just be physical, it would touch every corner of my life, every relationship, and every reflection I saw in the mirror. I was on the edge of something monumental, and I could feel the suspense building, an electric anticipation that promised exhilaration, fear, and irrevocable change. The first step was simple: call the clinic, set up the consultation, and face the first moment of truth. But even in that simplicity, the tension was unbearable. Would this step unlock freedom or unleash chaos? Would Isabella's support endure the reality of my transformation? And most importantly, could I finally become the full woman I had always known I was inside, without losing the world I had built around me? The answer would come soon, but for now, the story hung suspended, a tightrope between fear and desire, secrecy and revelation, anticipation and irreversible change. And as I drifted to sleep that night, my dreams were filled with possibilities I had never dared imagine, visions of a new self, of a new life, and of a transformation that could change everything forever. Alex stared at the clinic's polished glass doors, his reflection staring back at him like a stranger. The late afternoon sun caught the sharp angles of his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw and the slight tremor in his fingers. He had dreamed of this moment for years, yet now that it had arrived, a storm of fear and excitement churned within him. The decision to undergo surgery and hormones was irreversible. There was no retreat, no pause button. And yet, the anticipation made his heart race like a drum. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender, a strange combination meant to soothe the anxious. Patients sat quietly, some flipping through magazines, others scrolling absently on their phones. Alex felt every second stretching, amplifying the suspense. The receptionist's polite smile did nothing to calm the knots in his stomach. He shifted in his seat, glancing at the clock every 30 seconds, each tick a reminder that time was marching relentlessly forward toward a life-altering change. His mind wandered back to Isabella. She had been his anchor through everything, every moment of self-doubt, every secret whispered late at night, every experiment with feminine clothing and makeup behind closed doors. She had encouraged him to embrace his true self, yet the thought of revealing everything to the outside world terrified him. What would his friends, colleagues, or family think? Could he ever feel safe in his new identity? Even as these questions gnawed at him, a small, thrilling voice whispered that this was exactly where he was meant to be. A nurse called his name, and Alex's legs felt like lead as he followed her down a narrow corridor. The walls were lined with certificates and photographs of past patients who had undergone similar procedures. Some faces smiled with radiant confidence, others were serene, almost contemplative. Alex wondered which expression he would wear once the transformation was complete. Would he feel the same confidence reflected in these photographs, or would the process of change expose vulnerabilities he had never faced before? Dr. Mara's office was calm, organized, and almost warm compared to the stark corridors outside. She greeted him with a firm handshake and a direct gaze that seemed to see through every layer of hesitation. "Alex, I'm glad you're here," she said. Her voice was calm, but carried a weight of authority. "We'll walk through every step of the procedure and hormone therapy. There's nothing we won't discuss." As she explained the surgical procedures, the hormone treatments, and the expected timelines, Alex's pulse quickened. Each detail added both excitement and dread. The transformation would be total, his body reshaped, his features softened, his hormonal balance shifted permanently. It was everything he had imagined during secret late-night experiments with dresses and makeup, yet hearing it aloud made the idea terrifyingly real. He had fantasized about this life for years, but now it was on the cusp of happening, and every fiber of his being was alert to the unknown. Isabella squeezed his hand gently across the desk, grounding him in the moment. "You're going to be amazing," she whispered, her eyes glistening with emotion. Her presence offered both comfort and a mirror to his own fears. He realized that this wasn't just a physical change. This was an emotional journey, a test of courage, trust, and resilience. The suspense of taking this step into the unknown was almost unbearable, yet it was interlaced with a thrill that made him feel alive in ways he hadn't experienced before. The consultation ended with Dr. Mara scheduling the surgery and the initial hormone injections. Alex left the office feeling a strange mixture of elation and tension. The weight of what lay ahead pressed on his chest, yet beneath that pressure was a bubbling excitement, an anticipation of the first steps toward becoming the woman he had always known he was inside. Back in his car, he stared at the steering wheel, fingers drumming nervously. He tried to imagine the upcoming days, the first hormone injections, the subtle shifts in his body, the small but thrilling experiments with clothing and makeup. Each imagined scenario was tinged with suspense. Would he recognize himself in the mirror? Would the changes be as empowering as he hoped? Or would the reality bring unexpected challenges? Even mundane activities now carried a sense of tension. Driving home, Alex noticed the way sunlight reflected off buildings, the small movements of people on the street, the ordinary world continuing unaware of the extraordinary transformation awaiting him. Every pedestrian, every glance felt like a potential test, a silent reminder of the dual life he was about to step into. That night, alone in his apartment, Alex set out a small stack of clothes he had carefully selected, a soft blouse, a delicate skirt, and a pair of heels he had practiced walking in countless times. He ran his fingers over the fabric, feeling the texture, imagining the way it would feel against a body that was slowly, inexorably, becoming different. The suspense was electric, the thrill of possibility mixed with the fear of exposure, and the gentle, steady encouragement from Isabella played in his mind like a lullaby, softening the sharp edges of anxiety. As he drifted to sleep that night, Alex's thoughts were a whirlwind of what-ifs and what will it be like. The first part of his journey, the decision, the appointment, the realization of the irreversible path, was complete. The suspense was only beginning, and with it came the intoxicating awareness that life, as he had known it, was about to change forever. And the clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and floral disinfectant, a combination that should have been calming but only heightened Alex's nerves. He sat on the examination table, the paper beneath him crinkling softly with every shift. His hands were clammy, and he rubbed them together repeatedly, trying to calm the tension coiling in his chest. Today was the first step beyond words and dreams. Today, hormones would begin the physical transformation that had lived in his mind for years. Isabella stood nearby, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, grounding him with her calm presence. "You're going to feel amazing," she said, though Alex could hear the nervous tremor in her voice. She knew, as well as he did, that this was the moment where anticipation and fear collided, where fantasy would start to meet reality. The nurse entered with a small tray of vials and syringes. Alex's eyes followed every motion, the glint of the needles, the faint shimmer of the liquid inside. It was surreal, the first tangible, physical step toward becoming the woman he had always imagined. Dr. Mara came in, her presence steady, her voice firm yet soothing. "This is the beginning, Alex," she said. "The injections will start to influence your body subtly, at first. You may notice changes in mood, energy, and even small shifts in body contours over time. Every person responds differently, but this is the start of your journey." Alex nodded, his stomach twisting with nervous excitement. The first injection was administered into his arm, a sharp sting that made him flinch despite his best effort to stay calm. The nurse smiled reassuringly. "That was it," she said gently. "The process is simple, but the changes will come gradually. Your body is just beginning to respond." Even as the adrenaline faded, a new sensation replaced it, a subtle warmth, almost imperceptible, spreading through his chest and limbs. It was the first whisper of the transformation, a signal that his body was listening to the hormones, reacting to the journey he had chosen. Alex's heart raced at the thought. This was no longer imagination. It was beginning to manifest in the physical world. Over the next few days, Alex noticed small changes that made his pulse quicken and his mind spin with anticipation. The texture of his skin seemed softer, almost imperceptibly so, and his chest felt more sensitive. Every movement, even something as mundane as adjusting his clothing, carried new awareness. He ran his fingers lightly over his arms, noting the subtle softness he had longed for, feeling both thrill and vulnerability. Emotionally, the hormones stirred sensations he hadn't expected, a wave of heightened sensitivity to touch, fleeting moments of deep introspection, and an unexpected surge of empathy for those he had always admired fascinated him. He realized that this was more than physical, it was an emotional awakening. The suspense of the unknown, the uncertainty of exactly how his body would change, made every day a delicate balance between excitement and apprehension. At home, Alex began experimenting more boldly with clothing and makeup. Each new outfit, a flowing blouse, a soft skirt, a carefully chosen pair of heels, was a test of both skill and courage. The thrill of seeing himself in the mirror, catching the slightest reflection of the woman emerging within, sent shivers down his spine. Yet there was also fear. What if someone saw him? What if the changes were slower than expected? The suspense of possibility and potential exposure kept him alert, almost on edge, with every glance toward the window or sound of a passing car. Isabella continued to guide him with gentle encouragement, offering advice on posture, makeup techniques, and the subtle art of walking in heels. "It's not just the clothes, Alex," she said one evening as they practiced together. "It's how you carry yourself. Every movement tells your story. You're not hiding, you're becoming." Her words were a lifeline, yet they also reminded him of the stakes. He wasn't just changing in private. He was stepping into a world that might not understand, a world where judgment and curiosity lurked in every corner. Suspense grew not only from fear of exposure, but from the internal battle within Alex. Each new physical sensation, every subtle curve and softness, amplified a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. The mirror became both friend and adversary, reflecting the changes he had hoped for, yet reminding him that the journey was ongoing and unpredictable. Every glance stirred a cocktail of emotions: desire, nervousness, shame, and thrill, all tangled together in a heady, intoxicating experience. By the end of the first week, the changes were subtle but undeniable. Alex felt the first stirrings of femininity in posture, in the curve of his waist, and in the gentle sway of his movements. The suspense of what was to come, the full physical transformation, the reactions of others, the internal confrontation with identity, hung in the air like charged electricity. Every morning, waking to a body that was slowly shifting, brought a thrill and a tension that he had never felt before. The first part of the hormone journey concluded with Alex sitting before the mirror late one night, soft lighting casting gentle shadows across his evolving face. Fingers traced the emerging contours, lips parted slightly in awe. The thrill of transformation mingled with fear. He was beginning to see himself not as Alex the man, but as the woman he had always imagined. And yet, the suspense of the unknown loomed larger than ever. How far would the changes go? Would the world accept him? Could he truly embrace this new identity without losing himself to doubt or fear? As he turned away from the mirror, Isabella's hand on his shoulder, Alex realized that the real journey was only beginning. The hormones had started the process, but the emotional, psychological, and social trials awaited. The suspense of the next stages, the deeper transformations, the first encounters with others, and the challenges of living openly, hung over him like a storm, thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. The air outside the apartment felt different that morning, almost electric, as if the world itself sensed the subtle transformation in Alex. For the first time, he stepped out dressed fully in the clothes he had practiced at home, a soft lavender blouse that brushed his wrists delicately, a flowing skirt that swayed with each step, and heels that made his legs ache yet held him upright in a strange, empowering way. The mirror at the door reflected someone both familiar and unfamiliar, a delicate blend of Alex and the woman he was becoming. Isabella walked beside him, a steady anchor in her own confident stride. "Remember," she whispered, "it's about presence. You're not hiding. You're revealing yourself carefully, proudly." Her words were both comforting and electrifying. Alex's stomach twisted with a combination of nerves and anticipation. This was the first test beyond the walls of safety, the first brush with the outside world. Every step to the local cafe was a challenge. The world seemed sharper, more observant. Passers-by's glances felt magnified, some curious, others indifferent. Alex's chest fluttered at the realization that he was visible in a way he had never been before. Even small interactions, a barista asking for his order, a neighbor nodding from across the street, felt laden with potential discovery. Each response was a tiny heartbeat in the suspenseful narrative of his life unfolding. At the cafe, Alex chose a corner seat near the window. The sunlight highlighted the soft contours of his face, the subtle curve of his shoulders, and the faint shimmer of makeup he had applied meticulously. The sensation of being seen was intoxicating yet terrifying. He stirred his coffee nervously, feeling every muscle tensed, every breath shallow. The world had always treated him as Alex, the man. Now, for the first time, he felt the duality of identity stretching and testing him. Small changes were already apparent. His voice carried a slightly higher tone, unconsciously softened, and gestures flowed with a new grace. Even though the physical changes from hormones were still subtle, Alex noticed a delicate shift in the way his body moved, as if it were adapting to the persona he had nurtured in private. Each observation brought a surge of thrill and vulnerability, the suspense of not knowing exactly how others would respond amplifying every interaction. A woman at the counter smiled at him, a brief, polite recognition, but Alex's heart pounded in his chest as though she had seen something more. The thrill of being noticed, yet possibly misread, sent adrenaline surging. Every glance in his direction became a small test, a pulse of suspense that made him acutely aware of the world outside his apartment. Isabella's reassuring hand on his knee grounded him, but the tension in his muscles betrayed his inner storm. Back on the street, the subtle sway of his hips in the skirt drew curious stares. Alex felt both exhilarated and exposed, as if every passerby held the power to unravel the careful balance he had constructed. The suspense of potential judgment or recognition was almost palpable. He remembered Dr. Mara's words. The transformation was not just physical, it demanded emotional resilience, courage, and careful navigation of society. Each public step was a rehearsal for the life he hoped to embrace fully. The first trip to the cafe had barely concluded when Alex encountered a minor mishap. A gust of wind lifted the hem of his skirt slightly, sending a jolt of panic through him. He froze, heart racing, cheeks burning, and instinctively grabbed the fabric. Isabella laughed softly, a comforting sound, and whispered, "Breathe. You're in control." That small incident, seemingly trivial, symbolized the fragile tension between vulnerability and empowerment, secrecy and self-expression. Back home, Alex examined himself in the mirror again. The subtle shifts in body shape, combined with the external validation from cautious yet noticeable stares, reinforced a powerful sense of identity emerging. Yet the suspense was far from gone. Every reflection, every interaction, hinted at the possibility of exposure, judgment, or misunderstanding. The thrill of discovery mingled with anxiety, weaving a tapestry of emotional intensity that was both intoxicating and exhausting. That night, as Alex prepared for bed, He carefully laid out another outfit for the next day, a blouse in soft pastel pink, a pleated skirt, and shoes with just enough heel to maintain elegance without imbalance. His body had begun to respond more noticeably to hormones, a subtle curve to his waist, softer hands, and a gentle rounding in the shoulders. The suspense of change, gradual yet undeniable, made even routine actions feel charged with meaning. Isabella sat on the edge of the bed, brushing her fingers through his hair gently. "Look at yourself," she said softly. "You're becoming who you were always meant to be." Her words were affirming, yet Alex felt a deep awareness of the stakes. Each day, each experiment with identity, brought him closer to his vision but also closer to exposure. The suspense was no longer hypothetical, it was lived experience, woven into every glance, every step, every interaction outside the safe cocoon of their home. As Alex closed his eyes that night, anticipation thrummed through him. The next stage of transformation loomed ahead. Deeper physical changes, more public interaction, and emotional challenges that would test his courage and self-acceptance. The suspense was electric, a thrilling current that would carry him into uncharted territory. The first steps had been taken. The world was noticing, subtly, and he had survived. Yet the story was far from over. The weekend arrived with a mixture of anticipation and tension. Alex had agreed to accompany Isabella to a small gathering at a friend's house, a social test that would push him further into his evolving identity. He had practiced at home countless times, adjusting posture, refining makeup, and rehearsing the confident gait he now carried almost instinctively. Yet the thought of entering a new space filled with unfamiliar eyes made his stomach tighten. Isabella was calm, exuding her usual confidence. "You'll be fine," she said, slipping an arm through his. "Remember, this is about presence. You're not just wearing the clothes, you are embodying yourself." Her reassurance was soothing, but the suspense, the fear of judgment, of discovery, gnawed at him. Every step toward the car felt like a step into a stage where every glance might reveal the truth he still guarded so closely. The drive was quiet, both of them lost in thought. Alex kept adjusting his skirt and smoothing the fabric of his blouse, aware of the subtle shifts in his body that hormones had begun to produce. His chest felt more sensitive, the contours of his waist and hips slightly more pronounced, and his movements carried an elegance he had only dreamed of achieving. Each physical change was exhilarating, but the emotional tension of being observed by others, even in a private home, was almost unbearable. Upon arrival, Alex's nerves spiked. The door opened to reveal a small group of friends, some familiar, some strangers, their expressions welcoming yet inquisitive. Every eye that landed on him felt like a test, subtle judgments in their smiles, the tilt of a head, a quick glance that lingered a fraction too long. Alex's pulse raced, a mixture of excitement and dread. This was no longer practice. This was reality. Isabella guided him inside with a light touch on the small of his back, her presence both reassuring and protective. Alex navigated the room with caution, conscious of every movement, every gesture. His hands brushed against a counter, his skirt swayed slightly with each step, and his heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor. Each sound, each motion, was magnified in his awareness, heightening the suspense of being seen, evaluated, and understood or misunderstood. One of Isabella's friends, a woman named Clara, approached and offered a warm smile. "You look fantastic," she said. Alex felt a flush of warmth, a mixture of relief and pride. The compliment carried weight, a subtle validation of the transformation he was undergoing. Yet it also reminded him of the stakes. Any misstep could shatter the delicate balance he was maintaining between fear and exhilaration. The evening unfolded with a tense rhythm. Conversations buzzed around him, laughter punctuating the air, glasses clinking, subtle glances exchanged. Alex felt both included and scrutinized, the suspense of being observed never far from his mind. Hormones continued to alter his perception, heightening sensitivity to touch and sound. A brush of a hand on his arm or a casual nudge in passing caused an electric jolt to surge through him, a visceral reminder of the intimate connection between body and identity. At one point, a sudden question from a friend, "So, Alex, how long have you been exploring this look?" made his stomach drop. The room seemed to quiet around him, every eye sharpening in attention. He managed a nervous laugh, feeling Isabella's reassuring squeeze on his hand. "Just experimenting," he said, keeping his voice light. The suspense of truth and concealment mingled in every syllable, every pause. He knew he was walking a tightrope between revelation and discretion, and the thrill of that precarious balance was intoxicating. Later, Alex stepped onto the small balcony for fresh air, the cool evening breeze brushing against his skin. Alone with his thoughts, he reflected on the physical and emotional journey so far. The subtle curves of his body, the softness of his skin, and the heightened awareness of movement made him feel more alive than ever. Yet alongside that exhilaration lurked anxiety. Would these changes be enough? Would the world accept him? Could he maintain this identity without fear or shame? A gust of wind caught his skirt unexpectedly, causing him to clutch the fabric with a startled laugh. Isabella appeared beside him, smiling, a silent anchor in the storm of suspense. "Every moment like this," she said softly, "is part of learning who you are and what you can handle. You're doing beautifully." The affirmation was comforting, yet the lingering tension of being exposed in public space remained, a constant reminder of vulnerability and risk. As the night drew to a close, Alex found himself both exhilarated and exhausted. The evening had pushed boundaries he had never crossed before, testing not only his confidence, but also his emotional resilience. The subtle glances, the casual compliments, and the minor mishaps had woven a complex web of suspense and self-discovery. Each encounter, each movement, reinforced the reality that transformation was not just physical, it was deeply psychological, threading through every interaction, every thought, every heartbeat. Returning home, Alex lingered in front of the mirror, examining the subtle changes in his posture and expression. Hormones had started to influence not just his body but his perception of self, shaping both confidence and awareness. The suspense of anticipation, what tomorrow would bring, how further transformations would unfold, and how others might perceive him, was a constant undercurrent. Yet amidst the tension, a new sense of empowerment emerged. He was learning to navigate the world as the woman he was becoming, each day a small victory, each glance in the mirror a reaffirmation of identity. The days that followed the social gathering were a whirlwind of heightened awareness and restless energy. Alex had begun to sense a profound shift, not just in his body, but in his very perception of the world. The hormones had intensified, making his skin more sensitive, his emotions sharper, and every movement more deliberate. The thrill of crossdressing had evolved into something more profound, a tangible exploration of identity, wrapped tightly in suspense and secrecy. Isabella noticed the subtle changes immediately. "You're more confident," she said one evening, brushing a strand of hair behind his ear. "Your presence commands attention, even when you don't speak." Her words sent a shiver through him. Confidence was intoxicating, yet the suspense of exposure loomed constantly in the back of his mind. Every glance in public, every unexpected interaction, felt like walking a tightrope above a pit of judgment. Alex decided to test his limits further. Alone in a boutique filled with soft lighting and delicate displays, he wandered through racks of clothing, selecting outfits that challenged him in new ways. A form-fitting dress in deep burgundy caught his eye, elegant yet daring. He felt the thrill of possibility and the weight of risk. What if someone recognized him? What if a simple misstep revealed his secret? The suspense tightened around him like a second skin. At home, he tried on the dress in front of the full-length mirror. The fabric hugged his body perfectly, accentuating the subtle curves that hormones had begun to define. The reflection was mesmerizing. Alex ran his hands lightly over the fabric, over the contours of his figure, and felt a strange mixture of pride, fear, and anticipation. Isabella appeared behind him, her presence reassuring yet electrifying. "It suits you," she whispered. "You're becoming exactly who you're meant to be." The thrill of transformation was now inextricably linked to suspense. Alex's mind raced with possibilities, meeting friends, facing strangers, navigating public spaces, all while maintaining the delicate balance of secrecy and revelation. He practiced walking in heels, each step a small conquest over fear. The subtle click of the shoes on hardwood floors echoed in his ears, a reminder that every movement mattered, every detail could be observed, every slip could unravel carefully constructed confidence. That evening, Alex decided to take a walk through the neighborhood, feeling the cool night air against his skin. Each shadow, each passerby, carried the potential for discovery. He caught himself adjusting his skirt with nervous fingers, his heart pounding at the thought of being seen in his new form. Yet the fear was entwined with exhilaration. The suspense, the risk of exposure, had become part of the thrill. A sudden noise startled him, a car door slamming down the street, and he froze, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed caution, but a small voice inside whispered curiosity, the desire to experience life fully as the woman he was becoming. Each encounter, real or imagined, heightened his awareness, sharpening the edges of excitement and fear. At home, the transformation deepened. Alex applied makeup with greater skill, experimenting with shades and textures that highlighted his features. He styled his hair meticulously, the process both meditative and suspenseful. Every adjustment, every brushstroke carried weight. The reflection in the mirror was no longer merely Alex. It was someone entirely new, someone emerging from the cocoon of secrecy into a form both beautiful and vulnerable. Isabella observed silently, her eyes filled with both pride and concern. "You're pushing boundaries," she said softly. "That's good, but be mindful. The closer you get to revealing yourself, the higher the stakes." Her words underscored the tension that had been building for weeks, the danger of being caught, the vulnerability of showing the world the truth, and the suspense of navigating this dual existence. The next test arrived sooner than expected. A neighbor, unaware of Alex's transformation, knocked on the door, bringing a package. Alex's heart raced. He opened it with trembling hands, the burgundy dress he had chosen for a special outing inside. The simple act of interaction, normally mundane, was now laden with suspense. Could the neighbor sense the subtle differences in his voice, his posture, his appearance? The encounter, though brief, left his pulse elevated, his mind spinning with possibilities. That night, Alex stood in front of the mirror once more. The transformation was nearly complete, physical changes accentuated by careful clothing choices, makeup, and posture, emotional evolution shaped by confidence, fear, and exhilaration. The suspense had become part of his identity, an invisible thread binding his internal and external worlds. Every reflection, every glance, every breath was a rehearsal for the challenges to come, the climax that awaited beyond the safety of his home. As he prepared for bed, Alex laid out the burgundy dress, heels, and accessories for the following day. He understood now that each choice was a step closer to revelation, a delicate dance between self-expression and secrecy. The suspense, once peripheral, was now central. The emotional stakes had escalated, the risks had multiplied, and the thrill of transformation had reached a fever pitch. Finally, as he closed his eyes, anticipation thrummed through him. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new moments of tension, and the inevitable confrontation with the world outside. The build-up had been long and arduous, each part a careful threading of physical transformation, emotional intensity, and suspenseful engagement. Now, Alex stood on the edge of revelation, ready to step fully into the unknown, his heart racing with the intoxicating blend of fear, desire, and excitement. Alex had never felt anticipation like this. After weeks of transformation, experimenting with his identity, and testing his limits, he had reached the edge of his comfort zone. Yet nothing could have prepared him for the invitation that arrived unexpectedly that morning, an elegant gala, hosted by one of Isabella's professional acquaintances. The envelope was sleek, embossed with gold lettering, a world away from the casual gatherings he had navigated so far. Isabella slid it across the kitchen counter. "We're going," she said with a sly smile. "It's formal. You'll need to step fully into the look." Her words sent a thrill racing through him, but they also sparked a spike of anxiety. Public events were a new frontier. Every eye, every camera, every whispered judgment could expose him. He felt the pull of excitement and the drag of fear, intertwined like a double helix of emotion. Alone in his bedroom, Alex stared at the dress he had chosen. It was deep emerald, velvet, hugging his figure and accentuating every subtle curve. He had practiced posture, makeup, and poise, yet the stakes felt exponentially higher. This was not a small gathering. This was a crowd of strangers, some influential, some inquisitive, all likely to scrutinize him. The suspense tightened around him like a vice. He began the transformation ritual with meticulous care. The makeup was applied in layers: foundation, contour, blush, eyeshadow, and a final touch of deep crimson lipstick. Each brushstroke was precise, deliberate, heightening his awareness of every feature. The heels he chose were higher than anything he had worn before, forcing him to practice walking carefully, balancing elegance with the natural rhythm of his body. As he adjusted the dress, smoothing the fabric over his hips, he felt a new level of vulnerability. The reflection in the mirror no longer belonged solely to Alex. It was someone entirely different, someone beautiful, bold, and exposed. His pulse quickened as he imagined the crowd, the flashes of cameras, the curious glances. The suspense of potential discovery was exhilarating, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once. When Isabella entered, dressed in a stunning navy gown, Alex froze for a moment, taking in the sight of them both as a pair. "You look incredible," she whispered, eyes gleaming. "Confidence is everything. Hold it, and no one will doubt you." Her reassurance was a lifeline, but the fear of exposure lingered like a shadow. Each step toward the car felt heavier, weighted with expectation and the thrill of the unknown. The drive to the gala was quiet, tense. Alex focused on his reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting posture, biting his lip to hide the tremor of nerves. Isabella's hand brushed his, a subtle reminder of support and presence. Yet the suspense persisted. What if someone recognized him? What if a conversation went wrong, or a misstep drew attention? The stakes had shifted from private experimentation to public exposure, and every second was charged with tension. Arriving at the venue, Alex was struck by the grandeur. Marble floors, sparkling chandeliers, and elegantly dressed guests milling about. The sight sent his heart racing. Isabella guided him through the crowd, her arm around his waist, whispering advice, reinforcing posture, and softening the edges of anxiety. Each step was a calculated dance, a performance that required both courage and composure. As they mingled, Alex felt the scrutiny intensify. Conversations flowed around him, each greeting and handshake a test. Compliments were offered, some simple, some lingering. "What a stunning couple," a guest remarked. Each word, though positive, carried a subtle weight of suspense. Alex's mind raced. Did they see through him? Could they sense the difference? Was he convincing enough to maintain this facade? A sudden question from a prominent guest made his chest tighten. "So, Alex, how did you develop such an exquisite sense of style?" The room seemed to pause, every eye turning slightly toward him. Alex felt the pressure mounting. Isabella's reassuring squeeze on his hand was grounding, but the suspense of the moment threatened to unravel his composure. He smiled, keeping his voice steady, attributing his style to Isabella's guidance and personal experimentation. The tension lingered, each syllable a tightrope walk between revelation and discretion. Later, near the grand staircase, Alex's heel caught on the edge of the carpet. A gasp escaped him, the sound amplified in the hushed elegance of the room. For a moment, every eye seemed to focus on him. He steadied himself, adjusting his posture, and laughed lightly, masking the jolt of adrenaline that surged through him. The near miss was a stark reminder. In this world, one small slip could ignite exposure, and the suspense was now a tangible, living presence. As the evening continued, Alex felt the duality of his identity intensify. He was exhilarated, empowered, and entirely exposed. Every movement, every glance, every interaction carried weight. The suspense of public scrutiny intertwined with personal transformation, each moment a test of confidence, skill, and emotional resilience. The gala, elegant and opulent, had become a crucible, forging a new level of awareness, vulnerability, and self-realization. By the time they left the gala, Alex's legs ached from the heels, and his mind buzzed from adrenaline. Yet beneath the exhaustion lay a profound sense of accomplishment. He had navigated the highest stakes he had yet faced, maintaining composure while embracing his evolving identity. The suspense of public exposure had pushed him further than ever before, preparing him for the even greater challenges and dramatic twists that awaited in the coming days. The morning after the gala, Alex awoke with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The memories of the evening were still vivid, the subtle brush of gazes, the delicate compliment that felt like both praise and scrutiny, and the minor stumble on the carpet that had nearly betrayed him. Every moment reinforced a truth he could no longer ignore. He was walking a precarious tightrope between exhilaration and exposure. Isabella greeted him with a warm smile, her hand brushing over his shoulder. "You handled last night beautifully," she said. "But now comes the real test." Alex's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" he asked, though part of him already knew. Isabella led him to a video message on her phone. It was from a mutual friend, inviting them to a brunch with several of Isabella's colleagues, some of whom had attended the gala. The pressure was immediate and tangible. Unlike the controlled environment of the evening before, this would be informal, personal, and unpredictable. Alex spent the next hour preparing, carefully selecting his outfit, a sleek, pastel dress that highlighted his now fully transformed figure. The reflection in the mirror revealed a level of femininity he had never dared to imagine. The hormones, the hours of practice, the meticulous attention to detail, all had culminated in a form that was elegant, poised, and undeniably convincing. Yet the excitement was tinged with fear. Public events now carried consequences, and one misstep could undo weeks of careful navigation. The brunch was held at a cozy cafe, sunlight streaming through the windows, highlighting the casual, yet social atmosphere. Alex's heart raced as they approached, noting every patron's glance, every subtle cue that could reveal his secret. Isabella held his hand, providing reassurance, but the tension between exhilaration and vulnerability was palpable. Each step toward the cafe felt like stepping further into a high-stakes stage, where every observation mattered. Inside, Alex was introduced to several colleagues, each one friendly, curious, and subtly analytical. Their eyes lingered on him longer than expected, prompting a cascade of internal dialogue. Was it admiration? Suspicion? A mix of both? The suspense was unbearable. He forced a smile, spoke with measured confidence, and allowed Isabella's presence to anchor him. Yet even as he did, he felt the constant pressure of potential discovery. Midway through the brunch, a voice from across the room caught his attention. One of the colleagues leaned over to Isabella, whispering something that made her glance in Alex's direction. His heart skipped. Did they suspect him? Was his transformation too convincing, too flawless? The moment stretched painfully, a silent trial where every second felt magnified. Isabella's subtle squeeze of his hand reminded him to breathe, but the tension coiled tighter with each passing heartbeat. A sudden incident escalated the suspense further. A child ran past, bumping into Alex and nearly spilling his coffee. He stumbled slightly, regaining his balance just in time. A collective gasp arose from nearby tables, and Alex forced a laugh, masking the surge of panic. The near disaster highlighted the fragility of his situation. Every small miscalculation could draw unwanted attention, and the possibility of exposure was no longer abstract. It was tangible, immediate, and frightening. After the brunch, Isabella suggested a brief walk through the adjacent park. The sunlight highlighted Alex's figure, and the casual environment added another layer of challenge. Strangers passed, some smiling, some curious, their gazes lingering. Alex could feel the weight of their scrutiny, each one a potential threat to his carefully maintained secret. Yet in this heightened state of suspense, he also felt a new sense of empowerment. He was learning to navigate both fear and confidence simultaneously, a delicate balance between vulnerability and poise. As they walked, a dog ran toward them, barking excitedly. Alex froze, unsure how to react without drawing attention to his transformed posture. Isabella quickly intervened, guiding him gently out of the path, but the incident left his pulse racing. The day, though mundane in its surface appearance, was now a gauntlet of subtle threats, small crises, and constant psychological tension. Each encounter, no matter how trivial, was amplified by the stakes he carried, the risk of being discovered, judged, or rejected. By the time they returned home, Alex's mind was spinning. The hours had been filled with suspense, unexpected interactions, and a constant, nerve-wracking awareness of every movement. The adrenaline, though exhausting, left him with a deeper understanding of his dual existence. He had faced situations that tested both his physical transformation and emotional resilience, and he had navigated them successfully, but just barely. That evening, alone in front of the mirror, Alex examined himself. The reflection was the culmination of weeks of experimentation, hormonal changes, and meticulous preparation. Every detail of his appearance was refined, yet every feature now carried the weight of potential exposure. The suspense of public scrutiny had become an inseparable part of his identity. He sat down, taking a deep breath, reflecting on the day's events. Each near miss, each whispered comment, each lingering gaze had sharpened his senses, heightened his awareness, and deepened his understanding of the stakes. The transformation was not just physical, it was emotional, psychological, and profoundly suspenseful. Alex realized that the coming days would only escalate the tension further, pushing him to confront challenges that were no longer hypothetical but real and unavoidable. As he prepared for bed, he placed his outfit carefully in the closet, readying it for the next test. The suspense had evolved into a living presence, a constant reminder of the delicate balance between exposure and concealment, thrill and fear, confidence and vulnerability. The buildup of the climax was far from over. This was merely the beginning of a series of events that would test every facet of his identity, every ounce of his courage, and every boundary of his secret life. Alex had begun to settle into a fragile sense of control. The brunch had tested him, but he had survived, and the adrenaline was slowly fading, replaced by a growing curiosity about the next stage of his transformation. He was alone in the apartment, finally savoring a rare moment of privacy. The sunlight streamed through the window, glinting off the polished surfaces, and the quiet seemed almost too peaceful after the tension-filled day. That calm shattered with a sudden knock at the door. Alex's heart leapt into his throat. Visitors were rare. Isabella wasn't expecting anyone. Every scenario flashed through his mind. Neighbors, delivery people, even someone suspicious from the gala. He froze, aware that one wrong move could reveal everything. "Alex," a familiar voice called. It was Emily, a colleague from his office, cheerful and energetic. "Is Isabella here? Thought I'd drop by and surprise you both." Panic surged. Alex had never been exposed in this space before, never faced the possibility of someone discovering him in his transformed state outside of controlled environments. He glanced at the mirror, noting the full reflection of his carefully cultivated appearance, the dress, the heels, the makeup, the perfect posture. Every element of his identity felt at risk. She's not home," he stammered, trying to maintain composure. His mind raced. How could he keep the secret intact? Emily was lively, inquisitive, and prone to chatting. Her curiosity could easily slip into suspicion. Emily stepped inside, waving at him with an oblivious smile. "I just wanted to see you. Don't worry, I won't take up much of your time." Alex's pulse raced, his palms sweating. The suspense tightened around him like a vice. Every movement he made had to be deliberate, measured, convincing. He led her into the living room, forcing casual conversation. Yet every glance toward the coffee table, Every step on the polished floor reminded him of the heels pressing against his feet. The heightened awareness of his body, of the transformed figure he presented, made every second a delicate balancing act. One slip, one misstep, and the illusion would collapse. Emily chatted endlessly, asking about work, weekend plans, and mutual acquaintances. Alex responded, careful to modulate his voice, his gestures, and his expressions. The suspense was palpable. He could feel it in every nerve ending, every twitch of muscle, every slight shift of posture. Maintaining the facade was no longer just about confidence. It was survival, a test of agility and emotional resilience all at once. Then came the moment that made his stomach drop. Emily casually moved closer to glance at a photo on the wall, a picture of Isabella and Alex, taken weeks ago when Alex had been fully presenting as male. Her eyes lingered. "I didn't realize you two had such a long history," she said softly, then smiled awkwardly. "Wow, Alex, you look so different." The words hit like a hammer. Alex's mind raced, calculating, improvising, trying to craft a plausible response. "Different? Oh, I've been experimenting with fashion," he replied, forcing a light laugh. His voice trembled slightly, betraying the nervous energy coiling inside him. Emily's gaze was sharp now, studying him more carefully. Suspense skyrocketed. The risk of exposure had just jumped exponentially. Emily tilted her head, curiosity glinting in her eyes. "Experimenting? That's interesting. You really commit to it, huh?" Alex swallowed hard. He could feel the sweat pooling at his temples, the subtle pressure of the heels intensifying his awareness of every movement. One misstep, one slip of the tongue, and his secret could unravel entirely. A sudden noise from the kitchen startled both of them. A glass fell, shattering into pieces. Emily jumped slightly, and Alex's heart leapt even higher. He knelt to clean up the shards, careful to maintain his balance in the heels, conscious of every tremor in his body. The suspense was now physical, a tangible sensation coursing through him. The risk of being discovered was immediate, real, and terrifying. Once the glass was cleared, Alex tried to steer the conversation to neutral ground. "So, how's work been?" he asked, voice steadying slightly. Emily relaxed, chatting more about projects, but Alex couldn't shake the adrenaline still coursing through him. Every word, every glance, every casual gesture carried the latent tension of near exposure. Emily's visit lasted longer than expected. Each passing minute was a challenge, a suspenseful test of Alex's poise and composure. He noticed subtle hints of suspicion, fleeting glances, and the occasional pause in conversation that felt loaded with unspoken questions. The tension mounted with every tick of the clock, a crescendo that threatened to erupt at any moment. Finally, Emily prepared to leave. She smiled warmly, unaware of the storm she had stirred. "Thanks for letting me drop by," she said. "You really look fantastic, Alex. Keep it up." Her compliment, though flattering, sent a shiver down his spine. She had unknowingly acknowledged the transformation, validating it in public, but also highlighting the razor's edge of secrecy he now teetered on. As the door closed behind her, Alex exhaled, relief washing over him, mingled with lingering tension. The suspense had been exhausting, draining both emotionally and physically, but it had also reinforced a truth he could no longer ignore. His life had irrevocably changed. The transformation was real, undeniable, and entirely public, even when he tried to maintain privacy. Alone, he allowed himself a moment to reflect in the mirror. The heels pressed firmly against his feet, the dress clinging perfectly, the makeup flawless. Yet beneath the surface of beauty, elegance, and poise, the suspense remained, a constant, living presence that would follow him into every interaction, every public space, every intimate moment. Alex realized that the stakes were higher than ever, that the path forward was fraught with uncertainty, and that the coming events would demand every ounce of courage, wit, and composure he possessed. The next morning, Alex awoke with a lingering sense of unease. Emily's visit had left him rattled, Her subtle acknowledgement of his transformation had confirmed both his growing confidence and the looming danger of exposure. Today, Isabella had invited him to accompany her to a networking event, an upscale charity gathering attended by colleagues, clients, and influential acquaintances. The event promised glamour, but also a testing ground for Alex's carefully constructed identity. Alex spent hours preparing, meticulously choosing every element of his outfit. The dress was soft, flowing, and flattering, a shade of lavender that complemented his complexion. The heels, carefully chosen, were elegant yet stable. Makeup was applied with precision, highlighting his features without appearing overdone. Each detail reflected the culmination of weeks of transformation, but the stakes now felt infinitely higher. This wasn't a controlled environment like the brunch. This was public, high-profile, and unpredictable. As they arrived at the venue, a grand hall adorned with chandeliers and polished marble, Alex's heart pounded. The air was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and soft music. Every guest's gaze seemed heightened, every passing glance a potential threat. Isabella held his hand firmly, sensing his tension. "Relax," she whispered. "You look incredible. Just enjoy yourself." But the reassurance did little to calm the storm of anxiety and anticipation swirling inside him. They mingled, exchanging pleasantries and introductions. Alex's nerves were on edge, his senses hyper-aware of every look, every gesture, every word. Each conversation was a balancing act, projecting confidence while concealing fear, elegance while masking vulnerability. He noticed subtle reactions from the attendees, raised eyebrows, whispered comments, but each was brushed aside, dismissed as mere curiosity. Yet the suspense lingered, an unyielding shadow over the evening. Then, disaster struck. As Alex stood near a display of refreshments, a voice cut sharply across the room. Well, isn't this a surprise?" He turned slowly, and his blood ran cold. It was Jason, a former colleague with a notoriously sharp tongue and an unsettling knack for observation. Jason's eyes scanned Alex from head to toe, a slow smile spreading across his face. The room seemed to quiet, though only for a fraction of a second, yet it felt like an eternity. Alex froze. His mind raced through possible explanations, excuses, defenses. Jason's presence was dangerous. He knew Alex before the transformation, and recognition could unravel everything. "Jason, hi," Alex managed, voice steady but strained. Isabella, sensing the tension, moved slightly closer, her hand brushing his back in a protective gesture. Jason's gaze lingered, piercing. "I didn't expect to see you like this," he said, his tone a mix of amusement and incredulity. "Quite the transformation, huh?" Every word was a potential dagger, each one threatening to expose the secret Alex had guarded so carefully. The suspense was nearly unbearable. The room seemed to fade away, leaving only Alex, Jason, and the fragile balance of deception. Alex forced a smile, keeping his posture perfect, voice calm. "Yeah, experimenting," he said lightly, though his heart raced. Jason's smile widened, and he leaned in slightly. "Interesting choice, bold. I have to say, it's convincing." There was admiration in the comment, but beneath it lurked a sharp edge of scrutiny. Alex felt the weight of the room's attention pressing against him, and the suspense escalated to a new level. Suddenly, Jason's hand reached out, lightly touching Alex's arm, a gesture meant to examine, to confirm, to test. Alex's body tensed. Every instinct screamed danger. He had rehearsed conversations, controlled his posture, but this physical contact introduced uncertainty. One wrong reaction, one misstep, and exposure was inevitable. Yet he had to remain poised, to maintain composure under pressure, to navigate the treacherous waters of public observation. Isabella intervened subtly, placing a hand on Jason's shoulder. "He's fine," she said softly, with a tone that blended reassurance and subtle warning. Jason chuckled, withdrawing his hand, but the tension remained. Alex's pulse hammered in his chest, adrenaline flooding his system. The suspense had reached a boiling point, a moment where every heartbeat, every breath, Every glance was charged with potential revelation. As the evening continued, Alex found himself in a series of high-stakes interactions. Each conversation was a test, compliments disguised as judgment, casual glances that seemed probing, and subtle hints of suspicion in otherwise friendly faces. The duality of excitement and fear became a constant companion, intertwining his emotions with every movement and word. The public exposure had intensified the stakes, transforming even ordinary social interactions into a delicate dance of concealment and performance. By the time they returned home, Alex was exhausted. The heels had strained his feet, the social tension had drained his energy, and the suspense of potential exposure lingered like a shadow over his consciousness. He stood in front of the mirror, examining himself with a mixture of pride and anxiety. The transformation was undeniable, physically stunning, emotionally empowering, but the risks were real, the dangers persistent, and the challenges far from over. Alone, he reflected on the evening's events. Jason's probing glance, the subtle comments, the scrutiny of others, all had left him both exhilarated and terrified. The transformation had been tested, his composure examined under the harsh light of public attention, and he had survived, but barely. The suspense of living between two identities was now undeniable. Every interaction, every glance, every word could unravel the delicate balance of his secret life. Alex realized that the climax was far from over. The coming days would demand courage, creativity, and an unwavering commitment to his dual existence. The transformation had been more than physical. It had reshaped his emotional resilience, sharpened his instincts, and heightened his awareness of both vulnerability and empowerment. The suspense remained, a constant, living presence that would follow him into every interaction, every public space, and every intimate moment with Isabella. The days following the gala were tense. Alex moved carefully through his routine, acutely aware that each interaction could reveal his secret. The thrill of transformation was intoxicating, yet now it carried an almost suffocating weight. He had navigated the public test with grace, but the risk of exposure never truly left him. Every glance in a mirror, every interaction, every knock at the door reminded him of how fragile his carefully curated identity was. It was late in the evening when Isabella suggested a quiet night at home. "Let's just relax," she said, smiling. "We deserve it after that hectic event." Alex agreed, relieved for the semblance of privacy, yet the suspense lingered. The transformation wasn't just physical, it had become a psychological tightrope, a balancing act between desire, fear, and identity. As they settled into the living room, Isabella went to fetch drinks, leaving Alex alone for a brief moment. That fleeting solitude was enough for a surge of doubt to grip him. He glanced at the mirror across the room, taking in his reflection, the heels that had carried him through the gala, the dress that clung perfectly, the makeup that highlighted his delicate features. The image was beautiful, intoxicating, but it also reminded him of the precariousness of his position. Suddenly, there was a soft click, the sound of the front door unlocking. Alex's heart leapt into his throat. Isabella wasn't home yet. The suspense coiled tightly in his chest as he realized that someone else had entered the apartment. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. Panic rose like a tidal wave. He barely had time to react before the door to the living room swung open. Standing there was Jason. Alex froze, every nerve firing, every muscle tensing. How had he found Alex's apartment? How had he known when to come? The thrill of secrecy collided violently with the fear of exposure. Jason's eyes scanned him, lingering on the transformation in a way that made Alex feel completely exposed. "Well, look at you," Jason said, his voice smooth but carrying a sharp edge. "Quite the change." Alex's mind raced, scrambling for words, for a plausible excuse, anything to maintain control. "Jason, it's not what it looks like," he began, but his voice faltered. The words sounded hollow even to him. Jason's gaze didn't waver, studying every detail, the dress, the heels, the subtle confidence, and the underlying tension. "I have to admit," Jason continued, stepping closer, "I wasn't expecting this. You really went all out. Impressive. There was a mix of admiration and mischief in his tone, a dangerous combination that kept Alex on edge. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every movement of Jason's body suggested he was testing Alex, probing for a reaction, seeking confirmation of what he suspected. Isabella returned just as the tension peaked. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. Jason, smirking, standing so close to Alex, who was frozen mid-step in his heels and dress. A silence fell over the room, thick with suspense. Alex's mind raced. Should he speak, confront, or retreat? Each choice carried immense risk. The stakes had never been higher. Jason's smile widened. I didn't mean to intrude, he said smoothly, but I couldn't resist seeing this for myself. You've transformed. The subtle emphasis on transformed sent a chill down Alex's spine. It was both recognition and confirmation, the moment he had dreaded, yet somehow anticipated. Isabella stepped closer to Alex, her hand brushing his back, a protective and reassuring gesture. Yet even her presence couldn't diminish the suspense. Alex realized that this confrontation, while tense and potentially exposing, was also pivotal. It was a test, a moment that would define the boundaries of his new identity and the resilience of his secret. Jason's eyes flicked to Isabella. I see you're aware, he said casually, though his tone carried underlying curiosity. Interesting dynamic. I have to say, this is a lot to take in. The words lingered in the air, heavy with implication. Alex's heart pounded. Every second stretched unbearably, each one a test of composure, poise, and courage. Suddenly, the sound of a phone notification drew all attention. Isabella's phone vibrated, and she instinctively picked it up. A message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. I know about him. Are you ready to see the truth? The message hit like a bombshell. Alex's eyes widened, and his pulse skyrocketed. The suspense was now unbearable. Someone else knew, someone outside of Jason, someone aware of the transformation. The risk of exposure had multiplied exponentially. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, the tension nearly tangible. Jason tilted his head, his eyes glinting with curiosity. Looks like the game's about to get even more interesting, he said, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Alex's mind raced. Who had sent the message? What would they do next? Could he maintain control, or was everything about to unravel? Isabella looked at him, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. Alex, we need to figure this out, she whispered, her voice steady despite the tension. He nodded, realizing that the stakes had risen to a level he could no longer navigate alone. The suspense, the fear, the thrill, all had converged into a single moment of uncertainty. And then, before he could react further, the screen went dark. The room was silent, except for the faint sound of the city outside. Alex's mind was a whirlwind of questions, fear, and anticipation. The climax had reached its peak. Exposure was imminent, secrets were dangling by a thread, and the coming moments would decide everything. The cliffhanger hung in the air. Would his secret be revealed? How would Isabella react? And who had truly sent that ominous message? The suspense was unresolved, leaving the audience on edge, desperate to know what would happen next. The apartment felt impossibly still after the sudden darkness of Isabella's phone screen. The city outside hummed quietly, indifferent to the turmoil inside. Alex's heartbeat thundered in his chest, each pulse a reminder of how fragile his carefully constructed life had become. The message lingered in his mind, echoing with a sinister promise. I know about him. Are you ready to see the truth? Isabella turned to him, her expression a mixture of worry and resolve. Alex, whoever sent that, this isn't just a joke. We need to be ready. Her hand brushed his arm, grounding him, yet also making him painfully aware of how exposed he truly was. For weeks, he had hidden behind heels, makeup, and careful composure, but now every secret felt precarious, every step a potential catastrophe. Jason leaned casually against the wall, an enigmatic grin on his face. Looks like the plot thickens, he said, his tone teasing yet charged with an unsettling energy. He knew enough to unsettle Alex without outright revealing anything. The suspense hung thick in the room, palpable, almost suffocating. Alex felt trapped between fear and exhilaration, the thrill of his transformation now intertwined with the looming threat of exposure. Alex tried to steady himself. "I don't know who sent that," he said cautiously, his voice low. "But we have to assume it's serious." Every word felt weighted. Every syllable carried the burden of secrecy and risk. Isabella nodded, scanning the room for any sign of threat, her instincts sharp and alert. Even Jason's teasing demeanor now carried a sharp edge, a reminder that control was slipping through Alex's fingers. The silence stretched. Every creak of the floorboard, every distant siren outside felt magnified. Alex's mind raced through scenarios. Was this someone from his past? A stranger who had discovered the truth online? Or someone closer, waiting for the perfect moment to confront him? The suspense was almost unbearable, a constant pulse of anxiety and anticipation that left him both vulnerable and alive. Suddenly, the apartment buzzer rang. The sharp, unexpected sound jolted them all. Jason's eyes glimmered with mischief. "Well, that's convenient," he murmured. Alex's stomach dropped. Another visitor, another risk. He glanced at Isabella, who exchanged a tense look with him. "Stay calm," she whispered. "We need to handle this carefully." Alex moved cautiously to the intercom. The voice on the other end was distorted but familiar. "I'm here to see him," it said, deliberately ambiguous. Alex's pulse raced. Every instinct screamed danger. Whoever it was had come with purpose, and the ambiguity made the suspense almost unbearable. He looked at Isabella. "Do we let them in?" he asked, voice tight with tension. Before she could answer, Jason leaned in. "Maybe it's time," he said, his tone unreadable. "Time to reveal everything." The words hung in the air like a knife poised above a thread. Alex felt a shiver of fear and excitement. The thrill of being caught and the terror of exposure were now inseparable. Isabella stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "We need to be smart. Whoever it is, we control the narrative. We decide how much they see, how much they know." Alex nodded, trying to focus on her words, to anchor himself in logic amidst the storm of adrenaline. But even as he breathed deeply, the suspense gnawed at him, relentless and unyielding. The intercom buzzed again. "Open the door," the voice said this time, more insistent, almost playful in its menace. Alex swallowed hard. Every scenario he'd imagined flashed through his mind: confrontation, judgment, exposure. He realized that this was more than just a test of secrecy. It was a test of courage, identity, and trust. He stepped back from the intercom, turning to Isabella. We have to face this," he said, trying to sound confident even as uncertainty clawed at his resolve. Isabella's eyes softened, but her grip on his arm was firm. "Together," she said. The word was a lifeline, a reminder that he was not alone, yet the suspense remained, thick and unrelenting. Then, without warning, the doorbell rang loudly, echoing through the apartment. Jason's smile widened, his presence both reassuring and unsettling. "Well, looks like your audience has arrived," he said, his tone teasing but edged with danger. Alex's heart pounded. The threshold of exposure was here, and there was no turning back. Alex moved toward the door, every step a battle between fear and anticipation. He reached for the handle, and at that moment a knock sounded from inside, a soft, deliberate tap that seemed almost intentional. Another message? Another warning? The suspense was electric, vibrating in every corner of the room. As he opened the door, the frame remained empty. Only a small envelope lay on the floor. His hands trembled as he picked it up, tearing it open carefully. Inside was a single photograph, himself in full feminine attire from weeks ago, captured somewhere he didn't remember being seen. On the back, written in elegant, chilling handwriting, "I see you. And soon everyone will." Alex's breath caught. The message was clear. His secret had been discovered, and now the game had truly begun. Isabella's hand found his shoulder, grounding him, but the weight of the revelation was almost too much. Jason stepped back, his eyes gleaming with curiosity and amusement, leaving Alex and Isabella alone with the envelope and the impending threat of exposure. The camera of the story metaphorically pulls back, leaving the audience with one last lingering moment: Alex's wide-eyed expression, the envelope in his trembling hands, the looming presence of Jason, and the unspoken question of who else knew and how much danger lay ahead. The suspense is unresolved, leaving viewers desperate to know: will Alex's secret survive? Who sent the photograph? And what will Isabella do next? The cliffhanger lingers, perfectly set for the next episode.